Today we're going to make the Summer Ruffled Pillow and Summertime Mini Frame for the July 2025 Hoop Studio. Grab your supplies and let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is open the pillow insert and let it puff up while we work on our project. Get it out of the bag, fluff it up a little bit. There's two options for this, a 6x10 hoop or a 5x7 hoop. I'm going to do the first option, the 6x10 hoop. I'm actually going to use a 9x12 because I don't have a 6x10, but we're going to work through this one step by step. Grab your fabrics, and right here all the fabrics are detailed, and it lets you know how much you need to cut for each fabric. There's a thread key here at the bottom of page 2. I'm not working with glide thread today. Let me show you what I'll be using. I have some what's called sim thread and Floriani. For the latte color, I'm using this one. For the ginger, for ruby, and for the midnight storm. I've got all my pieces cut. These two pieces, the red and then the white cream with the flower or cabbage and strawberry, need to have fusible on the back. The felt, which we're going to use later to make the little banner, it's almost cut to size, so I left it. And then make sure you trim your red felt, your project batting, and your width of fabric strip. The first thing we're going to do is prepare our backing fabric. There's a shorter edge and a longer edge. It says to take them and press the short edge down 1/4 of an inch, and this is wrong side up, so 1/4 of an inch. Press, and then another 1/4 of an inch and press, and then we're going to take it to our sewing machine and run a top stitch on the fold. These are top stitched. We can set these aside. Next, you want to take your two by width of fabric strips, cut off the selvage edge, which I already did. We're going to take one of our strips and cut it in half to make 2 shorter strips. Now you have 2 shorter strips. It says that you can discard one. I'm going to set that aside. I'm not going to throw that away. We can use that for something else. An optional step is to apply a fray preventative like this fray check to the edges of the ruffled strip. You're going to take your long strip and your short strip, line them up, sew that with a 1/4 inch seam, and it says to press it open. And then you'll find the other end of your long strip, right sides together, line them up again, 1/4 inch seam, and press it open. Just make sure when you do this, I would sew one side first and then kind of hold this strip and make sure it stays flat, and then bring over the short one so you don't accidentally, do something like this and then find out you've got a twist in your fabric. Now you've got a big circle. It has us pressing these wrong sides together like that and going all the way around the circle. So you've got it like this, fold it in half, take it to your ironing board, and press. Once you've got this folded together, it tells you to run a zigzag stitch along the edge to help prevent fraying. I've got a thought about that. I have some of this Pellon, it says style PLF 36, fusible interfacing, ultra lightweight interfacing for light to mid-weight fabrics. I'm going to go ahead and iron this on the back of my strips. I want to see how this does as far as preventing fraying and maybe giving this fabric a little bit more stiffness. This is going to be our outside ruffle. I've got the interfacing ironed on, and I have it folded in half again and pressed. It's actually staying folded a lot better. The next thing we need to do is look for the short strip. Here's my short strip. It tells us to mark the center with a pin. Here's my 2 seams, so I know that's the edges. Here's the center. I don't have a pin handy, but I have a clip handy, so I'll mark it with a clip. I'll just put the clip right over where the center is. There we go. It says to start at the point you marked with your pin, so I'll start right here. Sew a basting stitch all the way around the bottom here. This is the open edge, and a basting stitch has a stitch length of about 4 or 5 on your sewing machine, and you want to sew that all the way around about a 1/4 inch from the edge. You want a long tail at the start and the finish because we're going to pull the tails to create the ruffle. There's my basting stitches. I used a stitch length of 4. Pull your top threads aside. We're going to be pulling on the bobbin threads. It says to pull them to gather the fabric, and we want it to have a 30-inch circumference. I'm using a 50 weight thread. I'm pretty sure I'm going to break the thread. You might want to use a stronger thread. Yeah. We'll see how this goes. My thread broke. I didn't get very far. I've got a 30 weight cotton thread here. I'm going to do this by hand. And I don't like to do things by hand, but it's going to be easier. It's still attached to the spool. I'm just going to put this in my fabric. And I'm just going to go up and down. If you happen to have, I think it's a doll sewing needle or something, they're really big, they're kind of scary looking, you can do that. But this is an easy way to gather fabric. So when I get all the way around, I can just pull. I've got this gathered. I haven't measured it. I'm just going to keep it out of the way. I've tucked my needle in. All my threads are still attached. That way if I need to pull them more or add any additional thread or do anything else with it, I can do that when we get to it. We'll just slide it out of the way. Go ahead and load your stabilizer. I've got the Kimberbell light mesh cutaway. I had some odd sized pieces. This piece right here is just big enough for the hoop, but it wasn't big enough for the sides. I sewed on a couple of other pieces with a tiny stitch length. It's nice and secure. It's a good way to use up those scrap pieces. Hand tighten, screwdriver tighten, and let's go over to the machine. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. We're going to load our files. I have mine on USB. I need to find the Hoop Studio for Ruffled Pillow. Here it is. And we're going to start with the pillow. I'm doing the 6x10 version. Get that loaded, and then I hit set and embroidery, and we're ready to go. I've got a neutral thread on my machine. We're going to stitch our batting placement line. Grab your batting, place it over that placement line, make sure everything's covered. Double check. You can tape that down if you like. Usually it stays pretty well. I'm going to keep an eye on it. Now we're going to stitch our tack down line. Once that's stitched out, you want to trim everything outside the line. It also stitched a line right here. It's just about center. This is our piecing template. If you haven't changed your thread, now you want to make sure you've got the color called Latte on your machine. Got all my batting trimmed. I want to grab the piece 1 fabric. That's this one. Place it right side up over section 1. This is section 1, the bigger section. Cover that. Cover that center line and cover all your outside lines. If you get anything like that underneath, the dark red thread, pull it out. We're going to stitch a trimming and placement line. It's going to go right across this part right here. Grab your scissors and trim off this little piece right there. Once you have that little bit trimmed off, grab your piece 2 fabric. That's this red fabric with the flowers. Right side down, center it along that line. This orientation, not like that, like this. So line it up like that. Once that seam is stitched, you want to flip it open and press it. You can take it to your ironing board, you can finger press. I have this little roller. I'll pull it off and give it a good roll. The next thing we're going to do is stitch a tack down line. It's going to go all the way around the outside. Since I didn't press this on the ironing board, I'm going to press it extra flat, make sure it's nice and flat, and I'm going to put a little piece of tape up here at the top. Stitch your piecing tack down line. The next step, they have us drawing this line a 1/4 inch outside of the tack down line we just stitched. We're going to use that later for attaching the ruffle. I'm going to do that after we do all the other stitching rather than pulling the hoop off the machine right now. I'm going to go ahead and stitch the quilting detail. This is still in the color Latte. Once your quilting is stitched out, switch to your red thread. We're going to stitch the placement line for our felt to make our strawberries. Grab your felt, make sure to cover up both of those lines. You could actually cut 2 smaller pieces if you want. And we're going to stitch the tack down line. You'll want to grab your scissors and trim everything outside the lines so you can save this for another project. There is no decorative outline or anything after that for this piece of felt. It's what they call a raw edge applique, so trim it up as nice as you can. I'm going to show this. Do you see this? This has not been seated correctly. And when I removed my project to trim the strawberry felt, I thought, gee, I'm seeing a lot of my bobbin thread. And then I went back and looked at my quilting. Do you see that? That looks kind of messy. That's because, I'm guessing that's because I did not have this seated properly. But I'm going to go ahead and get in there and make sure everything's clean, and then reset my bobbin and check everything and make sure I have this set correctly, and then I'll resume. It looks like my tension is where it's supposed to be, so I think that was the problem. Since the quilting on this stitched out in two parts, here and here, and the thread here blends in. I'm not so worried about the way it looks here, and we're going to make that little banner with the little cards. I'm going to leave this quilting as is. I went ahead and picked out the quilting on this side, so I'm going to restitch the quilting on this. I've got a new bobbin, I cleaned it, I've got my neutral thread back, and if anyone's wondering, it took me about 15 minutes to pick that out. If you ever have to pick out something like this, what makes it easier, at least I think so, is I flip it to the back and I cut a bunch of the bobbin threads, like every 4 or 5 stitches, I snip the bobbin thread. Then when I go to the top and I start cutting the threads and pulling, everything pulls out. Let's get a look at that quilting. Oh, that's much better. That was worth picking out and redoing. Much better. Hooray. I'm going to go ahead and leave my little strawberries as is. I'm not going to go over them with the red thread. We'll go ahead and go to the next step, which is stitching the stems and leaves with the green. So change your thread. I've got my green on the machine. They call that Midnight Storm. If you're using the glide thread colors, let's stitch out the green. Let's get a look at that green. Fabulous. My trimming of my strawberry, not so much. I'll have to get in with some snips and clean this up a little bit. It's messy, but that came out great. Go ahead and switch your thread to the color they're calling ginger, and then we're going to stitch the seeds on the strawberries, and then the sunshine and summer, and then the clothespin placement lines. I'll go ahead and switch my thread, and I'll run all of that together. Once those two little clothespin placement lines have stitched, switch your thread color back to the one called Latte. We're going to take this off the machine. I'm going to have to draw that line 1/4 inch around the outside, and we're going to attach our ruffle. We're going back to step 15, unless you chose to do step 15 when it was step 15. I've got a Kimberbell water-soluble marker here. I get these in the punch needle kits. I think you can just buy them too. If you have clear blue tiles, you would have gotten one with your clear blue tiles. They want to mark 1/4 inch outside of that tack down line. My ruler has the nice 1/4 inch marked here. This is a Creative Grids ruler. I'm going to line that up along that tack down line. Don't press hard with these. The lighter you press, the easier it will be to get the mark off at the end. There's my mark. You should be able to see that. I'm going to do the other side, and then I'll have to get a smaller ruler because this isn't going to fit in that part of the hoop. It's time to get my mess of a ruffle. Remember, they wanted a 30-inch circumference on this. I think the easiest way to measure this once you have it gathered is to kind of pull it in half, and when it's 15 inches, that means your circumference will be 30. I'm going to work on evening out my gather and pulling my threads and then tying those off and getting this to the correct size. It tells you to find your basting stop-start point. That's about here for me. I have not removed my clip yet. Center it on the top edge. So your hoop should have a mark where the center is. The raw edge that way, out, the folded edge in, and it tells you to pin that. We will be removing the pin though. You never want to have pins going with your embroidery machine. That would be bad. We're going to be lining up this side. This is the side that's going to stitch first, but before I do that, I want to get a look at my ruffle. I don't have a lot of gather here at the top. See that? It's almost flat. I want to make sure that I space out the gather. And I did not do a stellar job gathering because I did this by hand. And I don't like doing a lot of sewing by hand unless it's like cross stitch or punch needle. So that's a different kind of stitching. Try and even out your ruffles. Now that's too flat. You know, it's a little decorative pillow. Don't stress over it. I'm trying to get it to look as nice as I can. It tells us to align this one next. I'm actually going to go across the way here and align my center next. And then I'm going to align these two centers. I want to make sure I have it even, that I don't accidentally, you know, line this up and then find out when I go to do this side, I have all the ruffle over here. And again, this is just for me. It does not tell you to do this side. It tells you to do this side next. We're going to be taping the right hand side, so get your tape handy. So we're going to line it up. I'm going to start with small pieces of tape. We're going to have to do a lot of odd taping. Yeah, rather than doing one giant piece, I think I'm going to do a little bit at a time. And I'm wondering, and you can make the call, if it would be easier to attach this on my sewing machine. I'm going to look forward in the directions a moment. Let's look. Taping and tacking down. Take the pins out. Bring it in again. Tape, tack it down. Take the tape off. Line it up. Tape it, tack it down. Line it up, tape it, tack it down. There's the last tack down line. So that's how this is all being done, with tape and tacking down. I'm going to go all the way around. All right, I'll give it a shot. Honestly, if I wasn't filming it, I would probably slap this thing on my sewing machine and just sew the ruffle on that way. But I will do my best to follow the instructions. I'm also a little bit worried about how this is going to go on the machine with so many layers. Here's how it shows the tape. A couple of short pieces and a long piece. I've got 10 short pieces. Let's get one long piece. Put the long piece over the short pieces. And then I'm going to put a piece up here and a piece down here. It says to take your pin out at this point. I have 2 pins. What I'm going to do is just put a little piece of tape as a placeholder, because I took the time to line this up and I don't want to have to line it up again. I'm double checking the instructions. This piece of tape is supposed to go over the entire ruffle to prevent it from being caught. I think that's sufficiently taped. Wait, I missed one spot. Did anybody notice what I did? I'm on the wrong side. I have to tape this side. I guess I'm ahead of step. I'm going to tape the whole thing rather than taping, and as you tape, stitch, pull the tape off, tape, again, stitch, pull the tape off, tape, stitch, pull the tape off. I'm taping the whole thing. Since I've got that side already done, I'm not taking that off. So I'm going to go around and tape the whole thing, and you can see if that works and then decide how you want to tape your project. I think I'm sufficiently taped. If you watched my unboxing video, you know one of the things they gave you this month was a roll of paper tape. This is why they gave you a roll of tape. So we're going to go to the machine, and I'm going to stitch all the tack down lines all at once, and then probably have a heck of a time removing all of that tape. I'm back at the machine, and I'm looking where it's going to stitch. Here's the top of my ruffle. Here's the raw edge. It's going to stitch right here. I'm going to end up with a really tiny ruffle, even though I lined up along that 1/4 inch line. We'll see how it looks. We'll give it a try. One side down, I will say that tack down is stitching right in the middle of that ruffle. I'm going to have the tiniest little ruffle. I lined it up along the blue We're going to go all the way around, and you might have seen my hands. I'm going to say, don't do that. You're not supposed to do that. But this is really puffy. I'm kind of pushing it down. Just don't get close to this. Your machine will go right over your fingers. It does not care about your fingers. Now I have to go remove all of the tape. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I may have over-taped. First of all, I spent more time trying to pick off this tape than I did picking out that quilting. I still don't have all the tape off. I'm not going to worry about it because anything that's outside the stitch line is going to be outside your seam, and we're going to put our backing on and trim and flip it. And even stuff that you can see when the pillow's done, this is going to go this way. Yeah, you can see how small my ruffle is going to be compared to the picture of the project. If I did this again, I would do everything up until attaching the ruffle on the embroidery machine, and I would do this step for the ruffle and the backing on my sewing machine, because then I would be able to line this up and I would have been able to see where I was stitching and got more of the ruffle inside this stitch line, because this is going to be a teeny tiny little ruffle when we're all said and done. I'm losing about half of my fabric outside of that tack down line. Let's get our two back pieces ready. You should have these iron folded and have your top stitch done. We're going to place these right side down, so right side together. Grab one piece, and for this project it doesn't matter how the overlap goes, which piece you put down first. I'm going to pull this a little bit towards me. You're going to want to be outside of that line we just stitched, and it tells you to overlap 1 inch-ish in the center. If you take your fabric, particularly this white piece, let me slide this up. I'm going to actually start with the bottom piece. That's going to help me. Line that up with the white piece like that. And then I'm going to add a piece of tape right there. I'm going to put my hand underneath to support it. You could also do this on your table. Then I'm going to take this piece. It says to overlap by about 1 inch. I'm going to go about there. I'm outside of my top ruffle. Yeah, I'm about 1 inch. I'm going to add some tape up on top. It shows you taping across the top, across the bottom, and then completely covering the fold. It's going to stitch all the way around. I can see that this is bubbling because of the ruffle. I'm going to try and pull it and see if I can't tape it a little bit better. I don't think it's going to tape perfectly because of the ruffle. Those are the only places it tells you to tape, top, bottom, and center, and then to stitch the final outline. I'm going to keep a real close eye on this one. We're all done at the machine. Go ahead and get your project out of the hoop, remove all your tape. Once it's out of the hoop, we're going to trim 1/4 inch outside of that stitch line. That's going to remove all of this extra bulk. Look at that. Look how much of my ruffle I'm cutting off. One thing I noticed as I was trimming was I was cutting away that mark, so I'm not going to have to get this wet. I'm going to try and get a little bit closer than 1/4 inch because I've got a lot of bulk with my ruffle. And remember, I put that really thin interfacing. I don't really feel like that added a whole heck of a lot of bulk to it. Once you've got everything trimmed, we're going to turn it right side out and poke out the corners. We'll see how much of my ruffle I have left. I'm going to go ahead and put this in. It does tell you to attach those little clothespins first before you put in your pillow insert. I'm going to do those later. I'm going to put mine on with a hot glue gun, so it doesn't matter if this is in or not. I'm trying to get the pillow insert in, and it wasn't going in, so I got a nice blunt tipped object and I poked a hole in the pillow insert. So be careful working with your pillow insert. This is all done. Let's flip it over and have a look. Here's where we are so far. I think adding the banner is really going to help. The worst corner is this bottom corner, but if you set this on something for display, you know, it'll sit on top of that, so that'll be hidden, which is kind of nice. This I can kind of pull and arrange a little bit, and it looks a little better. This one's kind of a lost cause. That one's really tucked in. it's going to be what it's going to be. I am glad though that the smallest part, it's this section right here. For some reason this was crooked. Again, when you put it on display, it's going to sit on that, so it's going to hide the bad parts. You can always put stuff in front of it too. Let's go ahead and stitch the little cards for the banner. For the pillow banner, we're going to use a 5x7 hoop, the white embroidery felt that came with this month's kit, and you need the wash away stabilizer. This is what the wash away stabilizer looks like. I'll make sure that's linked below. It feels like a regular cloth stabilizer, so you need to put that in your 5x7 hoop, hand tighten and screwdriver tighten, and we'll head over to the machine. We're back at the machine. Let's go ahead and pull up our file for this one. All my Ruffle pillow files are together. We're going to work on the pillow banner. It's all one file, nothing extra you have to do. It tells you to start with a visible thread, and the first heart we're going to stitch is with this Midnight Storm color, the green. So since this says to do this in a visible thread, I put this color on. We're going to stitch our placement line. Grab a piece of your felt. There should be 2 pieces of white felt in your kit. Make sure you completely cover this line, and the next step is to stitch the base tack down line and trimming line, but we are not going to trim at this time. We're going to stitch a heart in the center of each of these. The first one is the color that's already on my machine, the green. They call it Midnight Storm, and then it has the red next and the ginger after that. So make sure you change your threads in between, unless you want them all the same color. Pick whatever color you want, stitch them however you want. It's your pillow. Once these are all stitched, we're going to take this off our machine. You're going to flip it to the back and take your other piece of felt. Make sure to cover those placement lines. And they have us taping that on. This is going to be the back side. Before I put this on my machine, I need to change my bobbin thread. For the next step, which is going to be the outline on the little pennant cards, it says to match your bobbin thread to your top thread and to use the latte color. So I'm going to run a small bobbin of this color and switch this out. Make sure I put the plate on nice and tight, and then we'll stitch that last step. My bobbin thread matches my top thread. Here's the back. It's all taped and ready to go. Make sure it's pressed down real nice. We're going to stitch the last step on this, which is the pennant's outline is what they're calling it. Once those are stitched out, you're all done. Before you leave your embroidery machine, change back to your regular bobbin thread. We're back at our table. Go ahead, get your project out of the hoop, remove all your tape. Got my tape off. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this big chunk of extra stabilizer. We're going to be trimming on some of these lines, and this is all just going to be in the way. Now we're going to trim along the trimming lines. The trimming lines are the ones in green, not the little outline we just stitched, but the ones in green. It tells you to trim and cut off those stitches. I've got all 3 of these trimmed. It does say if desired to use a wet cotton swab and run it here along the edges to remove any of the excess wash away stabilizer. I don't feel like there's a lot of excess. I feel like it's almost more important to get a lint roller and get all that green thread off. You want to grab your twine, and it has you using a yarn needle. I probably have one somewhere. It's not handy. I'm going to be using my glue gun, but I will walk you through how you do this if you want to stitch this in. There's a great picture here. It shows that this is the back layer. You would run through a single stitch, and you're doing the 1 layer of felt only. I'll be using my glue gun instead. I'm going to knot the ends of my thread, which if you're going to stitch, you do this on the next step after you've run your thread through. I'm going to put a single knot on either end. So I have 2 knots. I want to line up the 2 knots. It's probably kind of hard to see. What I'm doing is determining where the center is, because we've got 3 of these, and they've got the red one in the center. Here's the center. I'm going to flip this over, and looking at where they have you stitch, they have you stitching pretty close to this top line. I'm going to put a small dot of glue right there, And it's the back, so it doesn't matter if it ends up being a big giant blob. I've got the center of my thread. Just going to let it sit right there in the glue and let it cool off. If you got some silicone finger covers, you can go ahead and give it a little press. I always let it cool at least a little bit first. It's not going to go anywhere. That's great. That'll work fine. We're going to glue the other two. Got my green card. Hey, that's funny. The one with the green on the front. The green heart card right there. And I want to place that close to the red. Now I'm gluing and I'm not stitching, so once this is down, it's not going to move. I won't be able to really slide it and adjust it. So I'm going to put it at a little bit of an angle so I have that nice arc. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the gold. Put some glue on the back. Oh, sorry. I have a paper plate over there, so I'm working over the paper plate instead of getting it in front of the camera. I'm going to do the same thing and sort of angle it before I glue it. And hope that'll work out nice. I think that'll be fine. I can always add a little extra. And if you don't like where anything is hot glued, you can put the tip of your hot glue gun on it and melt the glue and re-glue it. It's not a big deal. We need to get our pillow and attach our clothespins. This is another hand sew or glue. It actually says in the instructions either hand sew or glue. I'm going to glue. We've got those nice marks right there. So all I have to do is put a little dot of glue right on top of that mark. Put a little bit of glue right there. And I'm going to angle these this way, down and toward the center. Like that. And I'm going to do the other side. Try and make sure I've got them on the same level. That looks good. I do have a big glue blob, but that's alright. It'll dry clear. I'm going to let that cool. These feel nice and dry. I tied those two little extra knots to help me place it. So I've got the original knot and then I tied another knot, and I think it's even going to go closer than that. Let's go ahead and get that in the clip. And the next one in the clip. Everything is in. I am going to trim off some of this twine. Okay, so I've got a knot on either side of the clothespins on the outside because I added some extra knots. There's plenty of twine here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the extra. We are all done with this pillow. I like the little banner. I didn't have any issues using glue instead of stitching, personal preference. I may even add just a drop of glue right at that point and right at that point so nothing shifts. But this looks good. I'm going to set this aside and we're going to work on the next project in this month's Hoop Studio kit. Now we're going to work on the Summertime Mini Frame project. Same color threads. You've got your background fabric, project batting, fusible backing, light mesh cutaway, and the red felt, and then you'll need some paper tape and the frame that came in the kit. This can be done in a 4x4 hoop. I don't have a 4x4 hoop for my machine, so I'll be doing this in a 5x7. Go ahead and cut your project batting and your background fabric to size. You want to add the fusible backing to the back of the fabric and then load your light mesh cutaway stabilizer. We're back at the machine. Let's find the file that we need. We've got our Hoop Studio Ruffled Pillow folder, and inside of that I've got the 4x4 project. Going to go ahead and set that. There we go, we're ready to go. This is a very straightforward project. Simple background quilting and applique. We're going to stitch a batting placement line, place the project batting, tack it down, trim it, and then you've got the background placement line for your fabric. We'll place our fabric, we'll go ahead and tack it down and stitch the quilting, and then we'll do the applique. I'm going to go ahead and go through these first few steps. We just did that on the other project, so I'll go ahead and set that to music and I'll pick it up at the applique. Once your quilting is stitched, switch to your red thread, and then we're going to stitch the line for the placement of our felt strawberry. Once you've got your outline placed, cover it with felt. There is another piece of felt that came with this, but this was the one we already used. You just need to make sure it's covered, and you can keep the rest for another project. Stitch your tack down line. It came out nice this time. You're seeing a little bit of the light coming through, but see how it's nice and red? I didn't have any of the bobbin poking through because I fixed the bobbin cover. Trim off the extra, and this is raw edge applique, so there's no detail stitch. Once it's trimmed, switch your thread color to the green color, and we're going to stitch the leaves. Switch your thread to the ginger color. It's going to stitch the seeds on the strawberry, the words summertime, and then we're going to stitch a trimming line. We are off the machine. Go ahead and get this out of the hoop. I already cut the jump threads. There were some jump threads on the strawberry, so I cut those off and I gave it a good lint roll. It says to go ahead and trim right on that trimming line. Grab yourself a ruler and trim that, and we're going to pop it into the frame once we have it trimmed. Grab your frame that came with your kit. You need to get these flipped up. I like to use a screwdriver. Now it does have this little piece of plastic. It has plastic on plastic. There's a little piece here you have to peel off and remove that, otherwise it's frosty. I'm not going to use the plastic. I frame a lot of my cross stitch and I never use the plastic or the glass. I don't want any reflection on it. Now it does say you can press this. I'm going to try putting it in the frame and seeing if it needs to be pressed. It's pretty flat. It's heavily quilted. It's like a little quilt block. Since I'm not going to use the plastic in the frame, I want to make sure that this is going to be secure. I'm going to grab my paper tape, make a little tape roll, put it on the back of my piece, and tape it like that. That way it won't move around when it's in the frame. Place that in the frame. That's going to look cute. And again, you can certainly use the plastic. And also, this is an unfinished wood frame. It doesn't have any really heavy varnish or anything on it. You could paint this if you want. I do a lot of painting on my frames. If you have some washi tape that you like, maybe it's got strawberries, you can add that along the frame. You could also take some of the extra fabric and do Mod Podge on it if you want to decorate the frame. But as is, it's done and ready to go. Let's get a final look at everything. I did add a little bit of glue right there and right there to make sure that'll stay secure. Here is my Summertime Ruffled Pillow and my Summertime mini frame. This would look great with a summer display like on their little postcard here. I hope you've enjoyed making both of these projects with me. Couple bumps in the road along the way, but they look great and they'll look really good on display. Please like, subscribe, and share if you have any comments or questions or suggestions. Maybe you're making this and you found an easier way of making the ruffle. Definitely leave them in the comments below. That way other people can read it as well. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.